"Take my bread, mister," the little girl said, holding up a piece of cornbread with dirt-stained fingers. The mountain man stared down at her. His hands trembled, not from hunger, from something deeper. Around them, Dusty Hollow was dying. Men with badges that meant nothing smashed windows. Families dragged their belongings into the street. A woman wept over scattered photographs. The wind carried ash and broken promises. Elsa Mayfield stood 8 years old in the chaos. Her dark skin caught the late afternoon sun. She looked up at the stranger with eyes that had seen too much but still believed in kindness. The mountain man was a giant. Wild hair, beard like winter scrub, clothes that spoke of solitude and hard country. He towered over the destruction, still as stone. "Elsa," her mother's voice cut through the noise. "Get away from him." The girl didn't move. She studied the stranger's face, saw something there that others missed. "You look hungry," she said. Silas Crowther's throat worked. The bread in her small hands was probably her last meal. He knew hunger, had tasted it in his younger days. But this child offering her final crumb while her world burned. His secret felt like a stone in his chest. Lydia Mayfield pushed through the crowd. 32 years of fighting had carved lines around her eyes. She ran the Lone Star in with calloused hands and fierce determination. Her daughter was her heart walking outside her body. "Elsa, come here now." The mountain man looked dangerous. Wild men from the high country brought trouble. Lydia had learned to trust few and protect what mattered. But Elsa stayed put. She kept the bread extended. "Mama, he's hungry." The stranger's eyes never left the cornbread. His hands shook harder. Behind them, Horace Blackthorne surveyed his work. 50 years old and sharp as a blade. His suit was too clean for this dusty place. His men followed orders without question. Soon this worthless town would be gone. The railroad would come through. Progress demanded sacrifice. He noticed the mountain man, tall figure standing motionless while chaos swirled. Something about the stranger nagged at him. Too still, too watchful. "Who is that?" Blackthorne asked his foreman. "Don't know, boss. Lives up in the mountains. Hermit type." Blackthorne filed the information away. Hermits didn't concern him. Poor folk with nowhere to run didn't concern him. Money concerned him. Power concerned him. This dying town would make him both. Silas finally looked at the girl's face. Really looked. She wasn't performing charity, wasn't seeking praise or recognition. She saw someone who might be hungry and offered what she had. Simple as breathing. The irony burned in his gut. Hidden in his mountain cabin sat enough money to buy this entire territory twice over. Railroad investments, mining rights. Smart choices made when he still believed wealth meant something. Now he lived like a pauper while this child offered her last bite. His shame had teeth. "Take it, mister," Elsa said again. Lydia reached them. She grabbed her daughter's arm, gentle but firm. "We need to go." The inn was their life, their future. If Blackthorne's men reached it next, they would have nothing. Lydia had built something from dust and determination. She wouldn't watch it burn while her daughter fed strangers. But Elsa pulled back. "He's hungry, Mama. We don't know him." He looked sad. Children saw truth in faces. Lydia studied the mountain man. His clothes were rough, but his hands were soft. His posture spoke of education despite his wild appearance. Something didn't fit. Around them, the destruction continued. Families loaded wagons. Children cried. Old men cursed fate and railroad barons and the world that ground good people into dust. Silas watched it all. Each broken window was a choice he didn't make. Each tear was help he didn't offer. His hidden millions could stop this with a word. But revealing wealth meant revealing himself. His comfortable isolation would end. The simple life he'd built in the mountains would crumble. Fear kept him silent. Fear and something deeper. Shame at what money had made of other men. Shame at inheriting fortune while good people suffered. Shame at watching from shadows instead of standing in the light. The child's bread trembled in the wind. Elsa looked up at him with complete trust. She believed in his hunger because she knew her own. She believed in sharing because someone had taught her kindness mattered more than keeping. Her mother had taught her that. Lydia stood tense as wire. ready to protect her daughter from whatever threat this stranger might pose. She'd faced down drunks and thieves and men who thought a woman alone was easy prey. This mountain giant didn't scare her, but his stillness did. Most men would have taken the bread or walked away. This one stood frozen like the decision would change everything. Maybe it would. Blackthorn finished his survey. The town was broken. A few more pushes and everyone would sell. Progress demanded clear land and empty spaces. Sentiment was expensive. Mercy was inefficient. He turned to leave but stopped. The mountain man still hadn't moved, still stared at the child and her offering. Something cold touched Blackthorn's spine. He built his fortune reading people, understanding what they wanted and what they feared. This stranger felt different, dangerous in ways that had nothing to do with violence. The wind picked up, dust swirled between them all. The dying town held its breath. Silas reached out with shaking hands. 6 months earlier, the mountain held its secrets better. Silas Crowther's cabin sat carved into granite and pine. One room, stone fireplace, table built from salvaged lumber. The kind of place where a man could disappear from the world below. But the world found him anyway. Every Tuesday, he rode down to Cedar Falls, 3 towns over from Dusty Hollow, far enough that questions stayed buried. He'd send his coded telegrams to banks in Denver and San Francisco, buy and sell investments that most men couldn't pronounce, railroad stocks, mining rights, government bonds. The fortune grew while he lived on beans and hardtack. His hands stayed soft despite the act. His mind stayed sharp despite the isolation. Money had its own language. Distance couldn't silence it. The ride back always felt longer. Dusty Hollow sprawled in the valley below his mountain. Tin roofs caught sunlight. Smoke rose from chimneys. People moved through streets with purpose and hope. He never stopped there. Until the day his horse threw a shoe. The blacksmith was dead drunk. The general store was closed. Silas stood in the dusty street holding leather reins and feeling exposed. Towns meant questions. Questions meant complications. "Mister," the voice was small, clear. He turned. The girl couldn't have been more than 8. Dark skin and darker eyes. Worn dress that was clean despite the patches. She held a doll made from corn husks and careful stitching. "Your horse is limping." Silas nodded. Words felt rusty in his throat. "Mama fixes things," she said. "At the inn." She pointed down the street. The Lone Star Inn stood 2 stories of weathered wood and stubborn pride. Paint peeled from the sign. Windows gleamed despite their age. The girl walked ahead without checking if he followed. Her trust was absolute, dangerous. The inn's front door opened before they reached it. Lydia Mayfield stepped onto the porch. 32 years of hard living had forged her into something unbreakable. Her dress was simple but spotless. Her hair was pulled back severe and practical. Her eyes missed nothing. "Elsa, who is this?" "His horse is hurt, Mama." Lydia studied Silas, took in his rough clothes and soft hands, his educated posture despite the mountain man disguise. Her face revealed nothing. "I can look at the horse," she said. "Cost you 2 bits." Silas nodded, followed them around back. The inn stable was clean, well-maintained. Lydia ran her hands down his horse's leg with the confidence of someone who knew animals, found the loose shoe, examined the hoof. "Need new nails," she said. "Can do it proper or you can risk it breaking off on the trail." "Proper." She worked in silence. Elsa sat on a fence rail watching. The girl hummed while her mother hammered. The sound was peace and contentment wrapped in melody. Silas felt something crack inside his chest. When had he last heard someone hum? "You live up the mountain," Lydia said. Statement, not question. "Yes, long way to come for supplies." "Sometimes." She finished the shoe, tested its hold, wiped her hands on her apron. "Dollar even." He paid her. Their fingers brushed when she took the coins. Hers were calloused from honest work. His were soft from counting money he hadn't earned. "Mama, can he stay for supper?" Elsa asked. "The gentleman has places to be." Silas mounted his horse. The shoe held firm. Lydia's work was solid, dependable. "Thank you. Bye, mister," Elsa called. He rode away carrying the echo of her humming. That night, alone in his cabin, the silence felt different, heavier. The walls seemed to press closer. His fortune sat in distant banks while that woman hammered horseshoes to feed her daughter. The unfairness ate at him. 2 weeks later, he rode through Dusty Hollow again. No horse troubles this time. Just curiosity and something that felt dangerous. The town was struggling. Paint peeled from buildings. Windows showed cracks. The mercantile had fewer goods on its shelves. People moved with the weight of worry on their shoulders. But the lone star in still gleamed. Lydia swept the front steps. Elsa played with her corn husk doll nearby. The girl looked up when his horse approached. "The shoe man," she said to her mother. Lydia straightened, studied his face again. "Horse trouble, passing through. Long way out of your way to pass through." She was right. The mountain trails led nowhere near Dusty Hollow. Coming here was a choice, a risk. "Mama, he looks hungry again," Elsa said. Lydia's eyes narrowed. But not with suspicion, with something closer to understanding. "We serve meals," she said, $1.50. The inn's dining room was small but clean. 3 tables covered with checkered cloth, windows that caught the evening light. The smell of cornbread and beans and something that might have been hope. Elsa chattered while he ate, told him about her doll, about the chickens behind the inn, about the book her mother was teaching her to read. Lydia watched from the kitchen doorway, alert, protective. The food was simple but good, made with care by hands that knew the value of every ingredient. Silas ate slowly, made it last. When he paid, Lydia walked him to the door. "Don't get many travelers through here anymore," she said. "Why not? Railroads coming, different route than folks hoped, towns drying up." Her voice carried resignation, not defeat. There was a difference. "You'll stay? This is home." Simple words, but they carried weight, conviction, the kind of strength that money couldn't buy. Silas rode back to his mountain carrying that strength with him. The next Tuesday, he sent different telegrams. Bought shares in businesses around Dusty Hollow. The bank, the mercantile, the grain mill, not enough to raise questions, just enough to keep them breathing. Anonymous loans appeared on the right desks. Mysterious payments settled overdue accounts. The town's slow death paused, caught its breath. Silas watched from his mountain, told himself it was investment, told himself it was strategy, but he knew better. A little girl's humming had cracked something open inside him. Her mother's strength had shown him what real wealth looked like. And for the first time in years, his hands didn't shake when he counted the cost. The fever came with the autumn rains. Mrs. Henderson was first, then the miller's youngest boy. By the 3rd day, half the town was burning with sickness. The kind that hollowed cheeks and left children crying for water that wouldn't stay down. Dusty Hollow had no doctor. The nearest physician was 2 days' ride through mountain passes that the sick couldn't travel. Silas heard about it from the supply wagon driver. The man's face was grim when he spoke of families watching their loved ones waste away. That night Silas packed his saddlebags, laudanum from his own supplies, willow bark tea his mother had taught him to brew, clean bandages and soap, things that might help, things that wouldn't raise questions about where a poor mountain man got medical knowledge. He rode down before dawn. The inn's windows glowed yellow in the gray light. Smoke rose steady from the chimney. Lydia was awake, working. She opened the door before he knocked. "You shouldn't be here," she said. "The sickness. I brought supplies." Her eyes went to his saddlebags, back to his face. Something shifted in her expression. "You know healing. Some." She stepped aside. "Let him enter." The inn's main room had been turned into a sick room. 3 beds held burning bodies. Mrs. Henderson, the pastor's wife. A young man Silas didn't recognize. Elsa sat in the corner, pale but not fevered. She looked up when he entered. "The shoe man came back, Mama." Lydia was already reaching for his supplies. Her movements were efficient, desperate. "What do you need me to do?" The question surprised him. Most people wanted to be told what to do. Lydia was offering partnership, trust earned through crisis. They worked through the morning. Silas mixed doses while Lydia spooned medicine into burning mouths. She changed bandages while he checked pulses and breathing. Her hands were steady, gentle but firm with the delirious patience. She'd done this before, lost people before. "Where did you learn medicine?" she asked during a quiet moment. The truth was complicated. Eastern schools before his father died, books bought with inherited money while he hid in the mountains, knowledge that felt stolen when good people suffered. Here and there. She nodded, didn't push, but her eyes lingered on his hands. Soft hands that knew how to measure laudanum, educated hands that belonged to someone with money for learning. The contradictions were adding up. By evening, the fevers were breaking. Mrs. Henderson asked for water and kept it down. The young man's breathing eased. Color returned to hollow cheeks. Lydia collapsed into a chair. Exhaustion carved lines deeper around her eyes. "They'll live, most of them." Relief hit her in waves. She pressed her hands to her face. Shoulders shook once, then steadied. Strength was her armor, but armor had weight. "Why?" she asked without looking up. "Why what? Why did you come? Why do you care what happens to us?" The question cut deep. Silas stared at his hands, at the medicine bottles that had saved lives, at Elsa sleeping curled in her chair. "Don't know," he said, but he did know. A little girl's humming had reached into his mountain cave and pulled him back toward humanity. Her mother's strength had shown him what real courage looked like. They'd become his family without asking permission. "You're not what you seem," Lydia said, statement, not accusation. "None of us are." She looked at him then, really looked, past the rough clothes and wild hair, searching for the man underneath. "You have education, money for supplies, hands that never held an axe long enough to callous." Each observation was a step closer to his secret. Each word was danger wrapped in curiosity. "You asking me to leave? I'm asking you to stay." The words hung between them, heavy with meaning neither was ready to name. Elsa stirred in her chair, opened eyes that were bright with trust. "Is everyone better now?" "Getting better," Silas said. She smiled, settled back into sleep. Outside, autumn wind rattled windows, the kind of wind that carried change whether people wanted it or not. The next morning brought visitors. Horace Blackthorne's carriage rolled down Main Street like Judgment Day. Black paint gleaming, horses stepping high and proud, the kind of transport that announced power before words were spoken. Blackthorne climbed down wearing clothes that cost more than most families earned in a year. His eyes surveyed the town with the cold calculation of a man who saw only profit and loss. His foreman followed, then two other men in suits that bulged wrong around the shoulders, businessmen, the kind who made offers people couldn't refuse. "Mrs. Mayfield." Blackthorne tipped his hat. The gesture was polite, empty. "Mr. Blackthorne." Lydia stood on her porch, arms crossed, every line of her body was defiance. "I hear you had sickness here. We managed." "Good, good. Hate to see people suffer unnecessarily." His concern was theater, practiced, false. "What do you want?" Direct. "I appreciate that in a businesswoman." He reached into his coat, pulled out papers folded neat and legal. "I'm prepared to make you an offer for the inn. Fair price. More than fair considering circumstances." "What circumstances?" "Railroads coming through, different route than originally planned. This town won't survive the change." Lydia didn't take the papers. "How different?" 5 miles east. "Through Peterson's Valley. Better grade for the tracks, less expensive to build." Each word was a nail in Dusty Hollow's coffin. The town would die without the railroad, everyone knew it. "People here have lives," Lydia said. "Families. History, sentiment doesn't pay bills, Mrs. Mayfield." Blackthorne set the papers on her porch rail, weighed them down with a stone. "Think about it. Think about your daughter's future. This offer won't stand forever." He climbed back into his carriage, rolled away leaving dust and dread in his wake. Silas watched from the inn's window, his hands clenched into fists. Money could change railroad routes. Money could save towns. Money could stop men like Blackthorne cold. His money, hidden in distant banks while good people faced impossible choices. That night, he walked Dusty Hollow streets in darkness, studied buildings that needed repair, businesses that needed investment, a community that needed hope. His anonymous help had slowed the dying, But Blackthorn's railroad would finish what time had started, unless someone with real power stood up, someone with enough wealth to fight back. Silas returned to his mountain carrying the weight of decision. The stars above were cold, distant, beautiful and unreachable, but the light in the valley below was warm. They came in the night. Silas heard the sounds from his mountain cabin. Glass breaking, wood splintering, voices raised in ugly purpose. He was saddled and riding before the echoes died. The lone star sat gutted under starlight. Windows smashed, front door hanging crooked on broken hinges. Tables overturned inside, chairs reduced to kindling. Lydia stood in her ruined dining room holding a broom. Her face was stone. Her hands gripped the handle white-knuckled. Elsa huddled behind the kitchen door, eyes wide with fear that no child should carry. What happened? Lydia didn't look up from sweeping broken glass. Blackthorn's men said we had until morning to consider his offer. Each word was controlled, measured, rage wrapped in dignity. Silas surveyed the damage. Tables that had held family meals, windows that had caught morning light, a lifetime of careful work destroyed in minutes. His wealth could fix this. His money could rebuild what violence had torn down. But revealing that money meant revealing everything. How much, he asked, to repair all of it. She finally looked at him, studied his face in the lamplight. More than I have. More than anyone in this town has. Silas reached into his coat, pulled out a roll of bills thick enough to choke a horse. More cash money than most people saw in a year. Lydia's broom stopped moving. Where did that come from? The question hung between them, dangerous as a loaded gun. Does it matter? It matters. Her voice was quiet, but underneath was something harder than stone. She'd built her life on truth, on knowing what was real. The money in his hands was real, but everything else about him was lies. I have resources. What kind of resources does a mountain hermit have? Each word was a step closer to the edge, to the moment when his careful fiction would crumble. The kind that can help. Help or control? The question cut deep. He'd watched rich men play with poor folks' lives, buying and selling human dignity for profit margins. Help. Prove it. She set down her broom, faced him full on, no backing down in her posture. Tell me who you really are. The truth sat heavy in his chest. Years of hiding, of watching from shadows while good people suffered, of letting shame keep him silent while courage demanded action. My name is Silas Crowther. I inherited money from railroad investments, more money than I know what to do with. The words fell between them hard as stones. How much money? Enough to buy this whole territory twice over. Lydia's face went through changes, surprise, understanding, something that might have been betrayal. You've been living in the mountains, pretending to be poor. Yes. While we struggled, while we went without. Yes. Why? The hardest question, the one that had eaten at him for years. Because I was ashamed, because men with money become monsters, because I thought hiding was better than becoming what I hated. She stared at him, through him, seeing the man he'd tried not to be. So you watched instead. I helped. Anonymous loans. Payments that kept businesses open. You helped from a distance, safe distance. Each word was judgment, fair judgment. I was afraid. Of what? Of this. Of you looking at me the way you're looking at me now. Lydia's expression softened. Not forgiveness, understanding. How long? Since my father died 5 years ago. 5 years of hiding. 5 years of cowardice. She picked up her broom again, swept glass that was already clean, thinking through implications. The medical supplies, your education, your soft hands, all bought with inherited money. Money you were ashamed to have. Money that came from the same railroads tearing this place apart. The irony was bitter. His wealth came from the very forces destroying everything he'd learned to love. And now I want to use it to fight Blackthorn, to save this place. Save it or own it? Another hard question, the kind that demanded honest answers. I don't know, she nodded, appreciated the honesty even if she didn't like it. Elsa, she called. Come here, baby. The girl emerged from behind the kitchen door, still clutching her corn-husk doll, still trusting despite the violence she'd witnessed. Elsa, this is Mr. Crowther. He's the man who's been helping our town. The child looked up at Sela's, no fear in her eyes, no judgment. You fixed the roof, she said. He had. Late at night when no one was watching. Anonymous repairs that kept families dry. Yes. And you paid for Mrs. Henderson's medicine. Yes. Why didn't you tell us? The question came from 8-year-old wisdom, simple and devastating. I was scared. Of what? Of people not liking me anymore. Elsa considered this, serious as a judge. Do you like us? Yes. Then it doesn't matter if you have money. Children cut through complexity with blade-sharp truth. Elsa saw what adults missed. Kindness mattered more than circumstances, but Lydia's face remained guarded. The town needs to know, she said. I know. They'll have questions. Suspicions. I know. Some will think you were playing games with their lives. Maybe I was. She studied him, looking for deception, for the calculating coldness that money brought to most men, found something else instead. You're still scared, terrified. Of what now? Of losing this, of losing you and Elsa, of becoming what rich men become. What do they become? Monsters. She set the broom aside, stepped closer, near enough that he could see flecks of gold in her brown eyes. Money doesn't make monsters, choices make monsters. What if I make the wrong choices? Then we'll tell you. The simplicity of it staggered him. Community as conscience. Family as anchor. Together, together. Outside, wind rattled the broken windows. Dawn was coming. With it would come decisions that couldn't be undone. Blackthorn would return. The railroad would come or it wouldn't. The town would live or die. But Silas wouldn't face it alone anymore. His secret was broken open, raw and bleeding in the morning light. For the first time in 5 years, that felt like freedom instead of shame. Blackthorn came with the dawn, not in his fine carriage this time, in a freight wagon loaded with men and crowbars and the weight of final ultimatums. The sound of boots on wood echoed through Dusty Hollow, doors being kicked open, families dragged from their homes, belongings scattered in the dirt like broken promises. Silas rode down from his mountain into the heart of chaos. His confession to Lydia had changed nothing. The world still burned. Good people still suffered. But now he had to choose what kind of man his money would make him. Mrs. Henderson clutched her baby to her chest while Blackthorn's men emptied her house. The pastor's wife wept over scattered photographs. Old Pete from the livery stable sat in the dust holding the deed to land he'd worked for 30 years. Time's up, Blackthorn announced from the back of his wagon. Towns condemned, railroads coming through, everyone out. His voice carried the authority of purchased law, badges that meant nothing, justice that bent to the highest bidder. Lydia stood on her inn's front steps, Elsa beside her, neither moving despite the chaos around them. This is our home, Lydia said. Not anymore. Blackthorn climbed down from his wagon, brushed dust from his coat. The gesture was contempt made visible. You had chances to sell, chose stubbornness instead. Now you get nothing but time to pack. He signaled his men. They moved toward the inn with purpose and sledgehammers. Silas dismounted, walked through the destruction with steady steps. Every eye in town followed him. The mystery man from the mountain, the stranger who'd brought medicine and asked no questions. Stop! His voice carried across the square, quiet but absolute. Blackthorn's men paused, looked to their boss for guidance. And you are? Someone with an interest in this town. Blackthorn studied Silas, took in the rough clothes and wild hair, dismissed him with a glance. Move along, mountain man, this is business. Yes, it is. Silas reached into his coat, pulled out a leather portfolio thick with papers, legal documents, investment records, proof of wealth that could buy and sell men like Blackthorn. What railroad contract do you have for this route? The question hit Blackthorn wrong. Too specific, too informed. That's confidential business information. Show me the contract. I don't have to show you anything. Silas opened his portfolio, retrieved a document stamped with official seals. This is the actual railroad contract, filed with the territorial government 3 days ago. Route goes through Peterson's Valley, 5 miles east of here. Blackthorn's face went white, then red. You're interfering with legal business. What legal business? You have no railroad contract for this land, no government authority to seize private property. The words fell into sudden silence. Even Blackthorn's men stopped moving. Who are you? Blackthorn whispered. Silas Crowther. I own the mineral rights to this entire valley, the water rights, the grazing rights. I own the debt on every business in this town. Each revelation was a hammer blow. Blackthorn staggered under their weight. That's impossible. Anonymous shell companies, holding firms, legal but hidden. Your homework was sloppy, Blackthorn. While Silas spoke, Lydia was working. She'd slipped away during the confrontation, returned now with a leather satchel and fire in her eyes. There's more, she said. She emptied the satchel onto the ground, papers scattered in the dust, contracts, correspondence, financial records. Found these in Blackthorn's hotel room, she said, while you boys were busy measuring who had the biggest wallet. Silas studied the papers. His face went hard as mountain granite. Forged railroad documents, fake government seals, letters from railroad executives who don't exist. He looked up at Blackthorn, saw a cornered rat wearing expensive clothes. You're not a railroad baron, you're a confidence man, a fraud. Blackthorn's men were backing away, smart enough to recognize a sinking ship. I can explain, Blackthorn stammered. Explain to the territorial marshal. He's riding in from Cedar Falls as we speak. On cue, dust rose on the eastern road. A dozen riders approached under official banners. Law that couldn't be bought or bullied. Blackthorn made his choice. Ran for his wagon while his hired men scattered to the wind. Whipped his horses into a desperate gallop toward the mountain passes. He made it 50 yards before Marshal Davidson's rope settled around his shoulders. The silence that followed was profound, sacred. The silence of truth revealed and justice served. Silas stood in the middle of Dusty Hollow's main street, surrounded by the people he'd protected from shadows. Their faces showed confusion, gratitude, fear of what came next. The town is safe, he said. Your homes, your businesses. Everything stays as it is. What about you? Old Pete asked. You own everything now. The question hung heavy. The community's future balanced on his answer. Silas looked at Lydia, at Elsa, at faces that had become family without his permission. I own the debt. You own the dreams. Seems like a fair partnership. Mrs. Henderson stepped forward, still holding her baby, still trembling from the morning's fear. Why? She asked. Why did you help us? The hardest question, the one that had no easy answer. Silas looked at Elsa, remembered a little girl offering cornbread to a stranger, remembered her mother's strength in the face of impossible odds. Because someone taught me that kindness matters more than keeping. He knelt in the dust, eye level with the child who'd changed everything. Thank you, he said, for the bread, for the lesson. Elsa smiled, reached out and took his soft hand in her small one. You're not hungry anymore, she said. She was right. For the first time in 5 years, he wasn't hungry. He was home. Marshal Davidson led Blackthorn away in chains. The sound of hoofbeats faded into mountain silence. What remained was harder than justice. Rebuilding trust. The people of Dusty Hollow gathered in the town square, families clutching salvaged belongings, business owners surveying damaged storefronts. All eyes on the mountain man who'd revealed himself as their secret benefactor. What happens now? Mrs. Henderson asked. Silas stood among them, no longer hiding behind rough clothes and careful distance. His wealth was exposed. His shame was public. His choices would define what came next. We rebuild, he said, together. Simple words, but the weight behind them was immense. Old Pete spat tobacco juice into the dust. Easy to say when you got money to burn. Money without wisdom burns everything it touches. Silas looked around the circle of faces, saw suspicion mixed with hope, fear balanced against desperate need. I made mistakes, hid when I should have helped, watched from shadows while good people suffered. His voice carried across the square, raw with honesty. Can't change the past, can change what comes next. Lydia stepped forward, Elsa's hand in hers. Mother and daughter united in purpose. What are you proposing? partnership, your sweat and dreams, my investment and connections. Build something together that neither of us could manage alone. The baker's wife raised her hand. What kind of partnership? The kind where you keep ownership of your businesses. I provide loans at fair terms. Profits stay with the people who earn them. Murmurs rippled through the crowd, cautious interest replacing suspicion. And if we fail, the miller asked, then we fail together, but we don't fail from lack of trying. Silas reached into his coat, pulled out a thick envelope. Deeds to every property I bought, debt papers for every loan I made. All of it canceled, fresh start for everyone. He handed the envelope to Marshal Davidson. Territorial government can oversee the transition, make sure everything's legal and fair. The silence stretched long. People processing possibilities they'd stopped daring to imagine. Elsa broke free from her mother's grip, walked to Silas with 8-year-old confidence. Does this mean you'll stay? The question cut to the heart of everything. 5 years of mountain isolation, 5 years of watching life from a distance, 5 years of choosing safety over connection. If you'll have me, she smiled, took his hand. We'll have you. The child's acceptance opened floodgates. Mrs. Henderson nodded. Old Pete grudgingly shook his hand. The baker's wife offered fresh bread. One by one, the community welcomed him home. But it was Lydia's acceptance that mattered most. She approached when the crowd dispersed, Elsa running ahead to play with the other children. You meant what you said about partnership. Every word. Business partnership or something more, the question hung between them. Months of careful distance. Of growing attraction neither had dared acknowledge. Of two broken people finding wholeness in shared purpose. Whatever you're comfortable with. She studied his face, searching for deception or hidden agenda, found only hope and patience. I'm comfortable with honest conversation, shared meals, taking things slow while we figure out who we are together. I'd like that. Good, because Elsa's already planning your birthday party. Apparently you look like someone who needs more celebrations in his life. The thought of birthday parties and family dinners and normal human connection overwhelmed him. 5 years of isolation had made simple joy feel foreign. But foreign wasn't impossible, just new. The months that followed transformed Dusty Hollow, fresh paint on weathered buildings, new windows catching morning light, businesses thriving under fair investment and community support. The Lone Star Inn expanded into a proper hotel. Lydia managed operations while Silas handled finances. Their partnership was built on respect and shared vision. Their romance was built on morning coffee and evening conversations, on watching Elsa grow confident and bright, on discovering that love could be steady and sure instead of desperate and demanding. The town grew too. The railroad brought visitors to Peterson's Valley. Some found their way to Dusty Hollow, found a community that welcomed strangers and valued character over circumstances, found a place where a secret millionaire and a struggling innkeeper had proven that different people could build something beautiful together. Years passed. Elsa grew into a young woman with her mother's strength and her adopted father's quiet wisdom. The town grew into a small city. Silas's mountain cabin became a weekend retreat instead of permanent exile. But some things remained constant. Every Sunday, the family gathered for dinner at the inn. Every evening, Lydia and Silas sat on the front porch watching sunset paint the mountains. Every time a stranger approached looking hungry or lost or desperate, they remembered the lesson a little girl had taught them. Kindness mattered more than keeping. On a spring morning 15 years after Blackthorn's defeat, Elsa stood on the inn's front porch. 23 years old now, beautiful and educated and kind. A stranger approached on foot. Young man with worn clothes and desperate eyes, the kind of desperation that came from having nothing left to lose. Elsa disappeared into the kitchen, returned with fresh bread from the morning's baking. You look hungry, she said. The young man stared at her offering. His hands trembled, not from hunger, from hope. Take it, she said gently. There's plenty more where that came from. From the porch, Silas and Lydia watched their daughter continue the tradition. watched abundance replace scarcity, watched kindness multiply across generations. The stranger took the bread with shaking hands. "Thank you," he whispered. "You're welcome. When you're ready, come inside. We'll find you work if you want it, a place to stay while you get back on your feet." The young man nodded, too overwhelmed for words. Elsa smiled, the same smile that had cracked open a mountain hermit's heart all those years ago, the same smile that had taught a secret millionaire the true value of wealth, the same smile that proved kindness was the only currency that truly mattered. The wind carried the scent of fresh bread and second chances across Dusty Hollow, carried the promise that broken people could heal, that isolated souls could find family, that shame could transform into purpose, carried the truth that sometimes the smallest gestures created the largest changes. And that is all to the story for now. Please let me know where you are tuning in from. Perhaps we will create a story there. Consider liking this video and subscribing to our channel. And if you enjoy our content, click this video on your screen. I promise you it's worth watching. See you tomorrow.